All right. Hey, everybody. This is a short lecture for you on for your HDEV 215 lifespan development class. I am going to lecture on, I'm sorry, I'm looking at my screen over here. I'm going to lecture, not lecture. I'm going to give you a condensed version lecture, sort of, just kind of touching on some of the highlights of information in chapters 5, 6, 7, and 8 in module 2 for this class. Let me share my screen while I'm talking. This is not, it's not enough of a lecture to replace any sort of reading, or smart books or anything like that. But I did just want to kind of touch on a couple of things for you in these chapters. So one of the things about this textbook is you're going to get a couple of these chapters here in the beginning that have a physical and cognitive section together. And it's super annoying because it makes the chapter really long. But if they didn't do that, we're already at 20 chapters. So if they didn't do that, this book would be like 25 chapters, and that's just insane. So where are we at here now? If you were also in my Human Development 348 class, Child Development, remember that this is the same information, but this class is going to start now to get ahead of that class. So just be careful. Don't get your classes mixed up, because a lot of it's the same information, but this class is going to start to pull away from that one a little bit. So just keep that in mind. So I'm looking at right now, I have shared my screen, and you have up here just module 2. I'm in student view perspective. So we're talking about 5, 6, 7, and 8. Those are your chapter notes. Eventually you'll see here I'll throw the video in there, but I need to do it first. And then you're going to do this module runs from February 14th to March 6th. And then you have 5, 6, 7, and 8 smart books there and your exam. So, and a discussion board. So this is what I'm looking at is module 2. So in this module, you have chapters 5, 6, 7, and 8. 5 is going to be a physical chapter. Or excuse me, 5 is a cognitive chapter. That's right, because your chapters are a little off. Normally, we're going to go physical, cognitive, and then social, emotional. This beginning part, chapter 5, we jump right into the cognitive. You had the physical stuff in chapter 4, and then we'll go on to the social, emotional. This chapter is all about Piaget, and it's about infant learning and infant development, and it looks at the cognitive process, and you're going to be looking at Piaget's sensory motor stage. So it looks at ideas, first of all, of schemes and assimilation and accommodation, and how babies organize information. Think about schemes as a file cabinet of where babies start to organize things that they learn about. When they learn something new, they assimilate it. They put that new information into that file cabinet, into their schemes. When they learn something new about something they already know that they might have to adjust, it's called accommodation. When we talk about, Piaget talks about the process, it's how do people in general, in this case babies, how do they organize all this information that they're taking in? And it's just one thing at a time. They're just organizing it and filing it and trying to make sense of things. This idea of what's called equilibration for Piaget is about the shift from one developmental stage to the next. So Piaget is very, very strict on that there are very specific ages and stages, as you will see with the sensory motor stage. Sensory motor stage is from 2 years, and it starts off with simple reflexes. And then first habits and primary circular reactions, secondary coordination of secondary, tertiary, and internalization of schemes. And when you read about these, you'll see that there are very specific ages that go with each one of those. He also talks about this idea of object permanence, and I just remembered I need to get you a video on that. Object permanence is this idea that babies do not understand that things are there, if they cannot see them. So this uses a card, but you can do the same thing with a blanket. If you put a baby's favorite toy on the floor and you cover it up with a blanket, they will not know where to look for it. If you take the blanket off, they will see it. You can cover that toy up right in front of them. They will not know that that toy is still there, that all they have to do is lift that blanket, or in this case on this slide, that they just have to look around that board. Right around 10 months, they still don't understand that. Around a year, they will start to understand that they can just move that blanket or look around that card and they will see whatever it is that was missing. So this slide just really breaks down the idea of simple reflexes, first habits and what they call primary circular reactions, the ages that go along with that, and what is happening. Reflexes, babies are learning how to coordinate their reflexes. Their suck, their swallow, their grasp. These are all new things for them. First habits and primary circular reactions is looking at, now you learned as a reflex to suck, for example. Now, when you are getting into the feeding position, many times you will see babies that will start to suck before the food is there. It's because they've learned that that's what's coming, that they will start to suck their thumb, that they might grasp, they're starting to grasp things a little bit more. As they move on, then secondary circular reactions, they might start making a noise. They might make a noise, and mom or dad might come back and go, "Oh, do that again." And they spend, an hour trying to get the baby to make a noise again. Baby figures out how to do that, and that keeps the parent there, keeps that caregiver there. There's other things that they can do with that as well. Coordination, they start to be very intentional with what they do. They can start to see things, reach for them intentionally. So everything right around age of 12 months is very intentional. And then they get into what's called tertiary circular reactions, where this is really, if you have kids, this is how they will throw something off a high chair 572 times in a minute, because it's fun to do that. They will throw things off high chairs or down the stairs. I had a car that had a moonroof, and my daughter would throw stuff out of the car. She thought that was the funniest thing ever. Like, there are blankets on Route 2 because she decided she was going to throw them up in the air. No, I did not go back for them. You don't go back on Route 2. But they might throw things. They're learning about the properties of things. And then internalization of schemes really is about things like make-believe play. So as you're reading through this, understand that Piaget is very intentional about looking at how babies progress. Now, this A not B error really comes from object permanence. So go back to this right here. Okay, in the beginning of this sensory motor stage, babies don't know that that toy is behind that card. They don't know to move the card. And it's amazing. If you have access to a baby that's 10 months or less, I would encourage you to try this with them. Sit the baby down with whatever favorite toy they have, put the toy on the floor in front of them or on the table in front of the high chair or whatever. Intentionally cover it up with a blanket, see what they do. They will become agitated. They won't like that it's gone. You can remove it. There's the toy, and they're happy again. These little ones won't know that they can move the blanket. Now, as they get older and they learn that they can move the blanket, then they are ready for this idea of what's called A not B error. With, can you now hide something? This is why peekaboo is so intriguing at this age. So they don't understand that something is there if you can't see it. But then, parents might ask if they hide something in a hand, or they might, maybe the baby's used to it being in one spot. Do they know to look in another spot to find something? That's the A not B error. So as they progress, they will get into this idea of knowing that they can look elsewhere for things. It seems like a very small thing, but it really is developmentally a very big thing. So, this book also gets in into a lot of evaluating theories. Yes, we can evaluate Piaget all day long, but Piaget is Piaget. Piaget is classic, and Piaget is there, and Piaget is not going anywhere. But there's just some evaluation. Some other things, operant conditioning. If you, I'm making myself a note of some videos that I need to post for you. Operant conditioning is this idea of, is behavior reinforced or punished? But it's not a good bad thing. Is behavior encouraged or reinforced, or discouraged, punished? Do you want the behavior to continue, or do you not? And what do you do to encourage or discourage a behavior? That is operant conditioning ideas. And I will post a video on operant conditioning for you. Habituation. Babies will become bored with things. So think of habituation as, let's say they were watching a mobile go around in circles, and it was just so intriguing, and then they got bored with it. They became habituated to it. But if you give them something new to look at, they will calm back down. Let's say you were using that initial mobile or whatever to calm them down. And it worked for a while, but then they became fussy again. If you give something new, they will calm down again. So the initial, they became bored with it, is habituation. Whatever stimulus you had that you want to get back, that's the idea of dishabituation, that you can get that response back simply by changing the stimulation. And again, this lecture is not meant to be, it's not meant to be a substitution for your book. It's not meant to be a substitution for 3 hours in a classroom, which quite honestly, 5, 6, 7, and 8 for me would have taken probably 4 to 5 class periods on a Tuesday, Thursday schedule. So this is not meant to be a replacement for you reading and learning and understanding. There's this, I think sometimes these notes we could certainly thin out a little bit. Like, okay, gaze following, is the baby following what they're looking at? It talks about memory. Babies don't remember anything, like 24 hours, that's about it. There's some other things in here about development and how you measure it, but again, a Bailey scale, and some other things about predicting intelligence. Yeah, but they're babies. Some language development ideas, looking at spoken word, looking at our rules, our sounds. Think about, the word to. What kind of to am I referring to? No pun intended there. Am I referring to the number, to we're going to something, or to also? We don't know. There's so much in the English language that is confusing. So a lot of this will talk about phonology and morphology, syntax, semantics, the way that language is. It'll talk about the importance of babbling, and just some other things with language and language milestones in that chapter 5. Chapter 6, you get into, now we're into a social emotional in infancy. Sorry, I'm getting a drink while I'm figuring out which slide I want. So social emotional is looking at the emotional development of a baby and how that develops for them. So you can read about this. Biggest things in this chapter. And again, this is not, just because I'm talking about it doesn't mean that other things are not important. The whole chapter is important. But it talks about, primary emotions. And then it talks about like primary emotions, joy, sadness, surprise, and fear. Primary emotions are shown in most everybody, in every living thing. Self-conscious emotions, they have to be older for this to learn about, like, guilt and that sort of stuff. there are different cries for babies. So your book talks about that. Some other emotions like smiling or fear, stranger anxiety when that comes in, separation protest when babies are trying to keep their caregiver there. They don't want them to go away. For older kids, this is the 900 drinks of water that they need, or the book that they need read before they go to sleep. Big thing in this is learning how to regulate emotions, how to calm themselves. This chapter also talks about temperament, types of temperament, easy, difficult, slow to warm up, just how they interact with the world. Your theorist is Erickson. Now, Erickson, you're going to do the entire semester. So when I talked to you in the beginning about the importance of doing your smart books and doing them honestly, this class especially, you will have Piaget up through adolescence, you will have Erickson the whole year. When you don't understand a cognitive chapter, for example, or you rush through it, the next time a cognitive chapter comes up, you're going to have more information. If you don't understand Erickson in the beginning, or you're rushing through your smart books, every time Erickson comes up, the system's going to throw you more questions than someone that knew it. So just be aware of that. Erickson talks about trust in this chapter, and how children have to learn to trust or mistrust the world. And that's really based on, do people respond to them? This chapter also talks about attachment. It talks about Bowlby's attachment theory, and it talks about um, uh, the stages of attachment for Bowlby, but then it talks about testing attachment with strange situation and the types of attached children. I will throw up a video for you on contact comfort. Again, if you're in the other class, it's the same video. But we'll talk about contact comfort and why Harlow really discredited, or excuse me, and discounted lots of ideas of Freud. So I'll throw up a few videos for you. I'm making notes as I'm talking to you. Freud, Freud is Freud, but Freud for development, for some other things he's still widely regarded, but for development, his theory really is becoming less and less important. We just know that for development, it is not all of the psychosexual stuff that he talks about. And quite honestly, once you read about Freud, read about Erickson, and then watch the Harlow video that I'm going to put up for you, and you'll see why Freud is wrong. So some other things, again, I talked about attachment. So pre-attachment, attachment in the making, clear-cut attachment. There's all kinds of things that they talk about with attachment, how that happens. Ainsworth is the theorist that came up with the strange situation experiment to then come up with individual differences in attachment. And I'm just making my note for another video for you. And then it talks about some caregiving styles as well, some other things about attachment, the role of hormones, ideas of family, ideas of transition of parenthood. That transition of parenthood is one of the hardest things for many, many, many couples. And then we talk about just some things that aren't very, very helpful, honestly. What parents might do to guide undesirable behaviors in their children. And then it talks a little bit about childcare in chapter 6. Sorry, I'm making a note for you. Or 6, yeah, 5, 6. So we're on to 7. Oh, sorry, I'm pulling up the wrong thing here. So your chapter 7 then talks about, now this is a physical cognitive chapter, and I don't know if you can see at the bottom, there's 51 slides in here. That's a lot of information. And your physical cognitive chapters are always going to be bigger. I'm sorry. It just is how it is. I promise after the 3rd test, it gets better. This is going to get into your physical changes, language development, early childhood education. The physical part of this is really just looking at how their body grows and develops in early childhood, the changes that happen, the changes in their motor development and their sleep, their nutrition, that kind of stuff. Looks at the ideas of death of children. I know that's not very happy, but you know. And then we get into pre-operational stage of Piaget. All right. So we look at Piaget's first stage was sensory motor stage. The second stage is pre-operational stage. So the idea of operations means logic. So for Piaget, pre-logic, it's this pre-logic stage where kids from 2 to 7, there's a very big difference between a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old. But the way that they think about the world very much changes from the beginning to the end. And it looks at this idea of limits of pre-operational thought. This idea that kids' thought is limited in what they understand, that their thought is very egocentric. It's very centered on themselves, meaning if they think it, everybody else thinks it. This idea of animism, this belief that inanimate objects have lifelike qualities. Anytime a child feeds a baby, that's an inanimate object that they are making come to life. Other limits of thought, this idea of centration, and then conservation. This idea that they don't understand that things stay the same even if their shape is changed. I will have a video for you that will point out several of the limits of pre-operational thought, and then I will have a whole one that talks about this idea of conservation, and I will post those for you to kind of help you understand. But yeah, these are some of the conservation tasks that'll be talked about in that video. So then there's all these conservation ideas. It will go over in the video that I will post for you. And this is kind of a summary of it. Conservation of number, of matter, of length, of liquid. There's all kinds of things. This chapter also talks about Vygotsky and what's called the zone of proximal development, meaning what do children understand and what can they do on their own and what do they need help with. So what they can do on their own is the lower level of their zone. What they need help with is the upper level. And the idea is that someone guides them or provides scaffolding to kind of help them work to and work through what they could do on their own and what they need help with. Once they can get to that upper limit where they did need help, now all of a sudden it becomes what they can do by themselves. What's the next task then that they have to learn, or that they need help with, that they need someone to guide them? And the idea is that you keep increasing their zone of proximal development. So there's a lot of discussion of Vygotsky in there. Just some comparisons of Vygotsky and Piaget. It gets into some information processing. I think information processing is okay. I think sometimes information processing theory can be very computer-based. Like it talks a lot about input and executive register and that sort of stuff. I think there's some good ideas in there, but I do think it could be a little bit revamped, I guess. This is great. The marshmallow experiment. This is so much fun to really look at. Can kids delay gratification or not? And it's just, although marshmallows for me, I don't really care. So it'd have to be something better than that. But can children learn to delay gratification or not? It's a super fun experiment. I'll try to find that video for you as well. So this also the idea of morphology with language. I will give you a whole video that actually will use wugs and tomas as an explanation. But it's a cool video that kind of shows that you can teach kids nonsense words, but they will actually try to use the correct grammatical changes. Like you can teach them the word wug, and if you ask them, if you show them two, they will actually say wugs, but wugs is a made up word. So we know that they're using the correct grammar, or trying to, with learning this new word. So I have a whole list of videos here that I will post for you, that I think will be helpful. And then this last chapter, chapter 8, just gets into social emotional development and early childhood. It talks about the idea of self and the sense of self. Erickson talks about this idea of initiative versus guilt. Remember, the first two stages of Erickson were trust versus mistrust and autonomy versus shame and doubt. You hope that they went down trust and autonomy, so by the time they get to initiative, they are ready to take the initiative to try new things. We're talking about 3 to 5 year olds. So is the child ready to go to preschool? Are they ready to try new things? Were they given the opportunity to make their own decisions in autonomy versus shame and doubt? So now they're ready to go on and take on the world and new tasks. Let's see here. There's some basic beginning of moral development. We'll talk more about moral development later, but just some idea of, what is justice? What is the same? Making sure that everybody has the same rules. What's this idea of imminent justice? That, if a rule is broken, are you going to give them a punishment immediately? Because if you don't, it loses its power. A child does something wrong on Monday, to punish them for something on the weekend is too long. So that your textbook starts to talk about that as well. Some gender development issues in this chapter as well, that by 2.5, kids are very aware of what is a quote unquote girl thing or a quote unquote boy thing. Yes, I realize that there is a huge spectrum with regards to gender, but for this age, for this class, we're talking about kids that are 2.5, very clearly thinking this is a boy toy, this is a girl toy, boys shouldn't do this, girls shouldn't do this. It's very intentional at that age, and they learn about it from the world around them. So again, this chapter isn't too bad. It talks about some parenting and parenting styles. It gets into some stuff about child maltreatment. You'll find that really the social emotional chapters are not too bad. It's usually the cognitive ones that I'm a little concerned about. So it talks about play and screen time. I mean, most of that stuff in there you can read for yourself. So, all right. So that's just a little bit on, sorry, my thing didn't hang on. There we go. So that's just a little bit on chapters 5, 6, 7, and 8. Again, it is not meant to be a replacement for you reading and doing your smart books. Again, this is 4 chapters. This easily would have been 4, if not 5 class periods on a Tuesday, Thursday. So that's a very short time for me to talk about this stuff, but hopefully I hit some of the stuff that is that are commonly confused things for you, and hopefully clarified them a little bit. So anyway, that's all I have. If you have other questions, let me know. Otherwise, have a great week, guys.